Well, it finally happened. When I was doing my video on what South Park teaches us about story structure, I got a recommendation from Shakar Saxena TN3FQ, sorry if I butchered that, to go further into the but therefore approach with storytelling for content. So I will be more than happy to adhere to that. And I also kind of want to go above and beyond just to kind of give, the most bang for your buck. So in this video for the Borealis Company, and for the first time in this channel, we're going to do a viewer recommended topic of using the but therefore approach that's commonly used by Trey Parker and Matt Stone in South Park and applying it into everyday life. So really, what I want to focus on are three key parts and really three real life scenarios that we can use the but therefore approach. As requested with content, but also with conversations and self-talk. So first, let's start with content. And throughout this time, I also want you guys to keep in mind too, but and therefore are very different than and then. Because but and therefore is all about intention and consequence. One thing leads to another. That's not always the case with and then. And we'll see this a little bit more in another example. But a current example I can give you right now is Harry Potter was born and then he grew up and killed Voldemort. That's correct. That's true. But I also just skipped 7 books or 8 movies worth of story. And story that's actually really important for getting from A to Z. So think about that when you apply it in your own everyday life. With content, you'll see this a lot with headlines and sales letters. So the most common example of this is for entrepreneurs wanting to sell a product. I'm not sure what the person who recommended this to me is in boat-wise, but when I used to do marketing and sales for entrepreneurs and when I was starting my own private practice, I would approach things from the perspective of my target audience has a problem, but they can't fix it. Therefore, I have a solution that I can provide to them. And if I write all of my copy from that perspective, it makes it more powerful because now there's a purpose behind this story that I'm telling. It's also very effective for headlines too. Now with headlines, the but aspect comes from the absence of information. So what you'll get a lot of times is a main headline, and typically it's whatever headline fits within a certain amount of character count, but it doesn't give you the full story. Therefore, they offer you a hyperlink to click on an article to read the full story. This happened to me, it happens to me every day. It happens to all of us every day. But it happened to me especially last week when I found out maybe an hour after the announcement that Hulk Hogan had passed away. And here's how it was set up. I was on Reddit and I saw a headline that said, Hulk Hogan dead at 71. But it didn't say the cause of death. Therefore, I clicked on the link to read the full article. So as long as you write your content from that perspective of, I know where you're coming from, but I know you're not where you want to be. Therefore, let me give you some information to help you get there. And the more fat you can trim off of your content, the better it's going to be for your audience and the more effective of a storyteller you're going to be in your sales and your marketing. Now, I do want to preface with people leverage or sometimes even abuse this approach by making clickbait or rage bait, which is really common. So I believe as long as you do it authentically, confidently, and honestly, you'll be in good hands no matter what you do. And yeah, never use it with the intention of misconstruing or misleading your audience to get a quick buck or a quick view, because not to say that I'm a subscriber to karma, but I do believe it comes back to you in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, I guess maybe I do believe in karma. Now, if you are in the boat of creating content, but not for sales and marketing, if you're making content just to make content, there are a lot of YouTube formats and YouTube structures that adhere to this really well. Typically, you'll see this as, the hook of a video, but they don't give you the full story or the full information, and therefore they will give it to you in the but therefore approach, little by little by little, until you get to the very end. That's what a lot of successful YouTubers do to keep their audience hooked. They don't give you all the information in one fell swoop, because what's the point, right? They like to give it to you in increments. I mean, nobody has perfected this better than Jimmy Donaldson. If you want to see the but therefore approach in the form of content at its most powerful, watch any Mr. Beast video and you will know exactly what I'm talking about. And even in the thumbnails and the titles, there's always a promise with that, right? And the stronger or the more contrasty you can make your promise at the start of the gate, the more likely people will want to click. Case in point, for my personal experience, I can't really speak on behalf of everybody else, but for my personal experience, it's not a lot, but as of today, while I'm recording this, the most successful video on my YouTube channel has the title, What Surfs Up Teaches Us About Freudian Slips. Okay, I give you that promise in the title, but I don't give you the full information or the full context. Therefore, people were motivated to click on the video. Okay, it's always about setup and promise, but you need to deliver on that promise. That's the therefore part. If you don't, people are going to think that you're misleading and you're going to get a lot of negative repercussions from it. So be mindful of that. Now let's talk about the second part, and that is conversation. The but therefore approach is rarely used genuinely in conversation, because if you listen to a lot of advice around conversation, it typically starts with people need to be better at conversations, because it's never really two people exchanging information about each other. It's more like two people going back and forth waiting for their turn to speak, and they don't actually listen, right? So if I'm talking to somebody, it can very quickly turn into, this happened to me today, and then this also happened to me today, right? And it's not really an exchange more than it is just waiting for my turn to butt in, right? That's how a lot of conversations go. So, and you can probably feel this when you talk with somebody who really is a good conversationalist, that doesn't happen. And what I found to be really effective for me in my circumstances is learning how to inquire within a certain conversation. So this is more of an inner monologue that I will ask myself about whether or not I can continue and help with this conversation, or if I can offer some additional information to see if they're interested. So here's an example of that. Let's say the person across from me has a sentence to the vein of, yeah, my weekend wasn't too bad. I happened to head by McDonald's, picked up my kids, and just went back home and crashed. That's a typical small talk sentence. But in my mind, what I'm trying to do is see it from this template. The person I'm talking to mentioned McDonald's and picking up their kids, but they didn't go too much into it. Therefore, I'm going to ask them more about McDonald's or picking up their kids. And what I'm looking for is something that I can build interest off of, that they can keep going with the conversation and I can learn more about them. Or in the other way, and this is something you'll see a lot, I think, with people who know how to pull in a crowd or honestly be really good at parties or group events. Charisma on Command, I think, has a better understanding and grasp of this than I ever could. But if you can learn how to be a storyteller in conversation, it will make you more magnetic and in some cases charismatic, or in some cases even attractive. If you can learn how to tell a story in a way that entices people and invites people and makes them say, what's next? And by applying the but therefore approach into conversation that way, you'll be able to connect with people a little bit better, at least from what I've seen with my experiences. And finally, and this is something that I've seen a lot with my background in hypnotherapy, I really want to talk about self-talk. Because self-talk is a story. It is your story that you get to tell yourself and nobody else does. And it's tricky because if you're not careful, it can be really destructive and lead to sabotage without you even realizing it. So an example would be something bad happening to you, right? We have a story about who we are now because of the past. And so if we paint the past in a bad light, it's going to reflect in the way that we perceive ourselves now. And the best way to use the but therefore approach in self-talk, and especially in the context of revisiting past events, is to turn a bad experience into a learning experience. And this is something that I had to do for myself plenty of times. It's something we all have to do with ourselves plenty of times. And here's a good example of this that's from my real life. I was constantly paying for takeout in college because I didn't want to cook, but I was always running out of money. Therefore, as I got older, I understood, valued, and started developing financial self-discipline. So that's one way to do it. You could always go from the perspective of, I always ordered takeout, but I was always running out of money, therefore I'm poor, right? That's one way you can do it, and that's one way to paint it as a bad experience. But again, if you want to paint it as a learning experience, you can switch it around and say, I used to eat takeout all the time as a kid, but I kept running out of money. Therefore, I started developing financial self-discipline and started controlling my cravings to fix my finances. It's learning how to reprogram your belief system so that way, even though you can't change past experiences, you can change the way you move forward and the way you can use it as motivation to move forward in a positive way. All right, so hopefully that is of great value to you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And I want to know in the comment section, what is an experience in your life that you got to see the but and therefore approach used in a productive or positive way?